Our next speaker is Dr. Robin Hsiung. And Robin has been with the clinic for a while, and he's worked on research areas, everything from Nintendo to genetics of Alzheimer's disease to the work that he's doing with frontotemporal dementia, particularly, I think, with the CCNA, or the Canadian Consortium on Neurodegeneration and Aging. And the CCNA has been alive for almost 5 years, and the endeavor is to go forward and see what's going to happen for the next 5.
Thank you very much. I need to stand close to the microphone because my voice is usually not the loudest. Anyway, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Canadian Consortium of Neurodegeneration and Aging. As Lynn has said, it's been going on for about 5 years. So the idea came about back in 2013 when the funders for a lot of the Canadian research, which is the CIHR, the Canadian Institute on Health Research, has been looking at their funding program. And for some of you in the academics, you may know that in order to get money to do research, we apply to a granting agency. The granting agency usually gets 10 times more than they can fund. So at the end, they have to screen through a lot of these different research proposals, and only about 10% get funded. In the past, when there aren't as many researchers, and when the funding was better, it was about 30 to 40%. But in the last 20 years, that 30% has been dwindling down to 10%. And it's becoming extremely difficult for even very, very good researchers to compete with everyone else and to get only 10% of the projects funded. So they thought, well, Canadian is a very collaborative environment, and maybe if we can get all the researchers together and share the data and do research together, then they may be able to fund a little bit more people together. So that's the idea, to fund one major project in all across Canada, and most of the people who are doing research in dementia can all share this data and the funding. It's going to be inclusive and broad spectrum, but it's also expected to be successful, productive, and unique. And it is designed to enhance synergy across the different disciplines. And so that there will be a lot of sharing, just not the data, but also the knowledge of the expertise of different researchers. So after many, many meetings over the year of 2013 to 2014, about 350 researchers across Canada has signed up to be part of this consortium. And with the many meetings and discussion, there are 3 themes, 20 teams, and 8 platforms developed within this huge consortium. And finally, it was launched in fall of 2014 with Dr. Howard Chertkov, who is at the Jewish General Hospital in McGill, Montreal, who headed up as the scientific director. And this is kind of a nice circular diagram to try and show you how all the research are going to come together. The first theme is on the prevention, so this is theme 1 to 6. Then there's a theme 2 on the treatment side of things, and theme 3 is going to look at quality of life and improving dementia care. So this one has more of the basic scientists looking at the very early stage of disease. This one is to look at the clinical stage when people have a dementia, what we can do for treatment, and then if they are a little bit further across the journey, what can we do to help these people to make life better? And then there are many cross-cutting platforms. That includes the clinical cohort, brain banking, academic clinical trials, transgenic colonies, that is to build animal models to study the disease mechanism, and imaging and database technology. So we have a lot of data. In order to take care of this, so much data, this is also required. And just a little bit more details about each of these theme. It goes from genetics to inflammation, protein misfolding, lipids, nutrition and lifestyle and prevention. So these are the theme 1. And theme 2, these are mostly the specific clinical cohorts. For instance, I was heading the frontotemporal dementia team to look at this particular syndrome. But there's also Alzheimer's disease, the early phases of mild cognitive impairment, Lewy body disease, etc. And then the quality of life, looking at a whole host of different things, including driving, gerotechnology. And the clinical platforms are across all the disciplines. For instance, genetics and DNA sequencing, brain banking. It doesn't matter what disease you have. We are still very interested in the genetics of each of the disease. And also the programs on the side is to training and building capacity. So within this context of the consortium, we are supposed to train the new generation of doctors and researchers to be able to do all these things. There's knowledge transfer, which is to change from the basic science research into clinical science, and then how do we apply this science into a clinical setting. There are ethical, legal, social implications, which is termed LSI. So if you look up the internet, this is what LSI stands for. And then women and dementia is also a particular interest. UBC is heavily involved in this, and many of the people you have seen in the picture are previous speakers, and some of them are current speakers as well. So Dr. Neil Cashman is heading up the protein misfolding, looking at a prion-like disease, and which is really very similar mechanism with amyloid as well. Dr. Wellington has talked to us about lipid and metabolism, but she's also doing a lot of interesting work on head injury and trauma. You know me, so I'm not putting my picture there. Dr. Feldman was previously heading the cross-cutting platform of academic clinical trials, and since he's moved to the States, Dr. Nygaard is taking up that role, and Dr. McKenzie is helping out with the neuropathology, brain banking. Some of the clinicians, Dr. Henry Bagava and Dr. Pedersen, are clinical sites recruiting patients in different areas of BC. So outside of Vancouver, Alex is recruiting in Victoria and Jackie in Prince George. And you may have met Dr. Teresa Louis-Ambrose previously looking at exercise and dementia, and she's helping out with the exercise studies. And Dr. DeMarco has a new initiative looking at biomarkers and how we can use biomarkers in the clinical setting. It's funding across many different places. I won't go into the details, but this is just a list of all the funding partners. Within CIHR, there are many different institutes, and all the different institutes are contributing up to $22 million to support this initiative. So Institute of Aging and the Institute on Research Strategy for Alzheimer's Disease gave the most, but then neuroscience, mental health, gender and health, Aboriginal and circulatory and respiratory health for more of the vascular disease. And so they're all contributing. All right, I'll have to move back to the microphone. So the funding partners are also contributing quite a lot, and that includes the Alzheimer's Society of Canada. Some of them are pharmaceutical. Sanofi was contributing, and some other private institute. And in BC, Michael Smith Foundation is helping out with the training and the programs for graduate students. So you can see that a lot of different funding organizations are contributing. So at the end, they got almost $33 million over 5 years. So $33 million sounds like a lot of money. But to put things into perspective, 33 million with 350 investigators involved, if you divide that, that's about $94,000 per investigator in the project. So $94,000, and that's over 5 years. That's approximately $18,000 per year per investigator. And for those of you who are in the academics, that is not enough to fund one PhD student a year. That's just maybe enough for one master level student to help one researcher. So it sounds a lot, but it's not that much. And I was just looking up at real estate in Vancouver last night. It's not enough to get you a Cold Harbor penthouse. But if you're settling with a view estate on Southwest Marine Drive, you might be able to get one there. So now moving into the clinical perspective. I'm running out of time already. So very quickly looking at what we are doing mostly at UBC is to collect the clinical data. Other than analyzing the data, we have to collect the data first. So the COMPAS ND is the comprehensive assessment of neurodegeneration and dementia. So comprehensive assessment of neurodegeneration and dementia. Is an observational cohort of people with many different types of dementia that all the different teams are involved in. So that includes the very early stage of subjective cognitive impairment, mild cognitive impairment, vascular disease, mild Alzheimer's disease, dementia with Lewy body, Parkinson's, frontotemporal dementia. We're collecting clinical data, imaging data, biosamples, and there'll be annual checkup as well as a clinical checkup after 2 years. And again, compared to other very successful studies, so UBC is also involved in a study which is headed by the United States called the ADNI, the Alzheimer's Neuroimaging Initiative. That study has been very successful, and this CCNA is kind of modeled after that, except that we're including many different types of dementia, not just the Alzheimer's type. So hopefully we can expand this comparison into the many different types of dementia. Why it matters? Because it's in the very Canadian spirit, we are very collaborative. So instead of really competing with each other, we're trying to be collaborative to get all the information together, put our brains together, and then try to learn a lot from the data gathered. And it's also highly efficient use of resource despite severe underfunding. And Canadians can handle that. There are many recruitment sites all across Canada, and I won't go into the details, but in the phase 2, we realized that we actually did not include the normal controls, which are important for comparison. So now we're up to the phase 2 funding renewal. We're hoping to get more funding for the normal controls for comparison. The clinical cohorts I already mentioned requires assessment, neuropsychological testing, MRI, which is a requirement. So for people who cannot have MRI, either because of a pacemaker or if they are claustrophobic or if their size doesn't quite fit in the scanner, they must be excluded. The other biosample collections, such as spinal fluid and microbiome, are optional, but we encourage you to please give us a sample if you're okay with it. Some of those are intervention studies, optional autopsy. And this was just at the end of April. Some of the sites are recruiting faster, but some of the more rare disease, such as Lewy body and frontotemporal dementia, are relatively slow because these are, I guess, less common diseases. And also there's a delay in the Ontario sites because of a competing study. So many Ontario sites are only started just at the end of 2017. So this is just same description in a pie diagram. The significance is that hopefully we'll learn quite a lot from the detailed cohort. So more to come in the coming years once we have all the data collected and analyzed. and this will be the outcome. I was focusing on the clinical data, but there are many aspects on the social and the care issues that I didn't really have time to go into, but that is also part of the CCNA. So thank you very much. Many people are involved, including many people in the room. Thanks.